Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, August the 7th, 2021. It is currently 12:52 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church located right here in Ovalo, Texas. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you're listening to me live today, feel free to jump into the chat by using the Spreaker app. Hit the little chat icon. You can offer your thoughts or perspective. If you're not listening to me live, please feel free to email me anytime at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. And that is very important for this episode, because this is one of those episodes where I really want to start a conversation. Now, sometimes when I try to start a conversation, I end up just talking to myself, okay? Sometimes that happens. But even when I'm just talking to myself, it's still beneficial, because at least it's allowing me to talk out these thoughts and try to process these thoughts and try to formulate and try to clean them up and formulate them into something that I think is beneficial and useful. It may never benefit anyone else, but it benefits me to go through the thinking process and trying to work it out and trying to figure it out. And the way this episode is going to work, I just want you to realize something. I have no notes in front of me. No, I do that a lot, where I just turn on the microphone and talk. Now, some people think it's crazy that I can turn on the microphone with literally no notes and talk for 2 hours, 3 hours, but I don't know why I can do that. I can do that. Now, some people say, well, you talk for 2 to 3 hours, but it's just mindless rambling. Maybe it is, but hopefully something that I say here will get you to really think. And the reason I really need your response in this one is because I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to put forth a question because I need your response, because I don't really have the answer. This is not a situation where I'm going to act like I don't have an answer just to get you to participate. I really don't have an answer. And the more that and basically this is all of this podcast episode all came about at about 12:30 a.m. this morning, 12:30 a.m., 1 a.m., while I was laying in my bed in the dark, listening to a podcast. And all of a sudden, my mind just started racing, going, you know what? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. And I think maybe because I don't know the answer, there's an answer in not knowing the answer. I know that doesn't make any sense. Hopefully it will make sense before we're done. But I really want to know your thoughts, because you may know something, you may see something, you may be aware of something that I am completely missing. And so I would love to get your perspective. All right. Are you ready? Okay. Here's what happened. 12:30 a.m., between 12:30 and 1 a.m., I'm in bed, lights are off, and I'm listening to the latest episode of The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It's a podcast that I've talked about numerous times. Everyone should subscribe to it. The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. It tells the story of the rise and fall of Mars Hill, pastored by Mark Driscoll. Yes, it's a big story in modern church history, everything that happened there. It's absolutely crazy. And there's lots of lessons to learn. How I have approached it is I'm not really listening to go, ooh, Mark Driscoll did this, ooh, Mark Driscoll did that, because that just feels like all we're trying to do is just gossip and slander. I'm trying to listen to it to go, wow, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from it? So think of it this way. When I listen to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, I'm looking to the past to see what I can learn in the present. But as I look to the past about the rise and fall of Mars Hill, I'm also trying to figure out where the church is going in the future. So I'm looking to the past to see what lessons can be learned and lived and applied in the present, but I'm also trying to figure out where the church is going in the future, and that's what we're going to be talking about. All right, now I want you to hear this clip. Now, this clip from the latest episode of The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, the entire episode is about branding, and we could have an entire discussion about that. But in the midst of their discussion about branding, they took a kind of an unexpected turn. I didn't really know. I guess I thought at some point this would have to come up, but just the way they approached it, I kind of like, wait, where are they going? And then it made a little bit more sense. But as soon as I realized where they were going, I was like, oh, okay. this raises a bigger question. So here's what they're going to do. They're going to go back in time at the very beginning of a new movement that started happening within Christianity. We'll call it a church movement. Now, if you've been a Christian for any length of time, you have probably experienced and seen when these different movements arise within the church, right? I can go through a number of them from the top of my head. I could go through a couple of them. The church renewal movement, all right? The church renewal movement. We could talk about that one, all right? We could talk about the church growth movement. We could talk about that one. We could talk about the emergent church movement. We could talk about that. We could talk about the missional church movement. Right? We could talk about the ecumenical movement. I mean, there's been so many at times where it's like there's something changing in the church, and it's like all of a sudden everyone starts going in that direction. We could talk about the purpose-driven church movement, which would have a lot to do with the church growth movement, the emerging of mega churches all over the country. We could talk about the kind of move to have a church and then have multiple satellite campuses, as they're called. That movement at different times I'm just talking, most of this I'm just talking about from things I've experienced in my life as a Christian. There was a time where there were these big charismatic revivals happening. You had Brownsville, and then there was kind of like this how would you call it? Charismatic revival movement that was happening. But throughout church history, there have been these movements. And I really want you to think about all of the church movements you have experienced, all the church movements you have been either a part of, you witnessed, you were there. The Vineyard movement, we could talk about that. I mean, there's just so many. And it's just, for the longest time in my Christian life, it just feels like there was always a new movement. There was always something happening within Christianity. Like, oh, look what's going on over here. Oh, look what's going on in here. There was this conference, and there was this conference, and it just seemed like there was so much happening. And I just want you to keep that in mind because, I'm going to be asking some questions, and I think there's an answer in the fact that I don't have an answer, and that will all make sense. But let's go back to another movement, one that I have not mentioned yet, and they're going to start at the very beginning of this movement. And you're probably going to know the name of the movement relatively quick. You're going to know many of the names that became associated with the movement. Many of the, ministries that kind of, shot to stardom and celebrity status in the movement. You probably remember how you had some interaction with it. I guarantee you had some interaction with it. But let's go back. This is, again, from the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, the latest episode called The Brand. This takes place at about the 29-minute mark of the podcast episode. I'm not going to play the entire segment because I'm not here to try to really respond to what they're saying. I want to take this mention of this movement, and we're going to take it, and then I'm going to use it for my own purpose, completely separate from what they were doing. All right, here we go. Listen carefully.
Back at the turn of the century, at the same time that conversations about the emerging church and postmodernism are starting to gather steam, another movement is brewing. Its roots stretch in several different directions, and into a really strange mix of denominations and personalities. But in spite of their differences, they formed an alliance and made a significant impact on evangelicalism in the 2 decades since. To understand how it kicked off and got momentum, you should probably talk about some institutions, certainly some churches, and definitely some celebrities. But almost universally, when you talk to folks who study the movement, they agree. You have to start by talking about seashells.
I've got a little article here from Reader's Digest.
This is John Piper, speaking at Passion's one-day event in 2000. Moments before, he told the story of 2 women, Ruby and Laura, both in or near their 80s, who'd spent their lives devoted to serving others, and who died while serving as missionaries in Cameroon. Their death wasn't a tragedy, Piper was saying, because they'd given their lives away to something that mattered.
This is a tragedy. Title of the article, Start Now, Retire Early. Bob and Penny took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago when he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells.
There's 40,000 people in this crowd that's gathered outside Memphis, and they're sitting on tarps and garbage bags, wearing raincoats, ponchos. It's maybe 70 degrees, but it's rainy and windy, just miserable to be out. And it's not an environment any preacher ever wants to have to show up in. But even going back, watching the video on YouTube, there's something kind of electric about it.
That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And there are people in this country that are spending billions of dollars to get you to buy it. And I get 40 minutes to plead with you, don't buy it. With all my heart, I plead with you, don't buy that dream. The American dream. A nice house, a nice car, a nice job, a nice family, a nice retirement, collecting shells. As the last chapter, before you stand before the Creator of the universe to give an account with what you did. Here it is, Lord, my shell collection. Well, not for Ruby and not for Laura. Don't waste your life. Don't waste it.
Every revival, when you look back on it historically, has this sort of spark moment, and it can be easily overplayed in the future, just for the sake of historical narratives. But if you're looking for one of that moment within the Young Restless Reformed, it would be John Piper's one-day message, "Don't waste your life," in 2000. For people in my generation, so essentially older millennials into Gen X, it's one of those things where I don't know how many of us were actually there and how many more of us claim that we were there in retrospect, or just that we were there in spirit. It's like the Woodstock of Young Restless Reformed.
This is Colin Hanson.
There you have it. The beginning of the Young Restless Reformed church movement, which brought people together from a lot of different, some really conflicting theological backgrounds, right? You had some charismatics coming in, yet you had others who were very not charismatic, but hey, we like Reformed theology, and usually that means we like Reformed theology as it relates to salvation. In other words, being Reformed in our soteriology, maybe not Reformed in other areas. And it brought all these people from different theological backgrounds. And then, boom, the movement exploded. And you had this ministry and this ministry and this celebrity and this conference and this conference and this conference. And you get the same thing that we always get with these big movements. You get celebrities. Here's what you get. You get celebrities. You get merchandising, right? Because you're going to have books, DVDs, and Bible study guides, and you're going to sell. You have conferences where people are paying hundreds of dollars to get in to hear these celebrities in the movement. And then the movement's there, and then usually at some point the movement, it either implodes on itself, it just fades away, it goes away until the next big movement, and then the next big movement. And each time, each movement creates its own new celebrities and its own merchandising. And you sell. You create major ministries. Mega churches spring up connecting to that movement, because once the movement begins to take and gain momentum, everyone wants to be a part of it. Everyone, you're sitting there in a little small church in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, look, there's the movement. Let's connect ourselves to that. Let's get connected to that, and then we can reap some of the benefits by being connected to it. And everyone runs to it. Everyone wants to be a part of it. Churches spend money sending their pastors to these conferences to supposedly actually learn how to, I don't know, do whatever they're supposed to do now to grow the church. Now, I'm not saying that within these movements, lives don't actually get, changed. People don't get actually saved. I'm just saying these movements really becomes about celebrity, merchandising, and that's what, and sadly, and conferences. That's really what it happens. It becomes celebrity, merchandising, and conferences. And always remember, it takes hundreds of dollars usually to get into most of the conferences. Now, some may do them for free, but almost in every case, it's like, here you are. And I just want you, once again, I know that I'm the anti-conference person, and everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I cannot wrap my mind around why any Christian has ever supported the idea that you pay hundreds of dollars to get into a building to see people stand up and preach God's word. The preaching of God's word becomes merchandise that is being sold for money. And the reason it's being sold for money is because it's a celebrity preaching. And if a celebrity is preaching, then it's worth hundreds of dollars to get in to hear them preach. It is insane. It's crazy, but it just shows how the church loves these kinds of movements. They're always waiting for the next one. And when it begins to take over, when that initial spark sets the fire ablaze, everyone goes running to it. It's like, there's like moths to a flame. It's like, if you turn on your porch light and all the bugs come flying to the light, that's how Christians are. Oh, look, new movement. Let's all go there. Let's buy the t-shirt, the coffee mug. Let's buy the book. Let's buy the DVD. Let's buy the CD. I know those are dated terms. Let's buy everything. Oh, let's go to this conference. Let's go to this conference. And yes. And then, okay, well, that one's over. Where's the next one? Now, I would ask the question, why is it that the church is so, I don't know the correct word to use here. Why does it feel like that the church is always so hungry and craving and always needing that next big movement, that next big thing? Why is it that there's so many Christians out there it seems like they're starving for it? And as soon as it starts, everyone comes running to it. Again, like bugs to a light, moths to a flame, however you want to describe it. What is it? I don't quite understand what it is. And the more I think about it, I hate to say this, I really truly believe this. I believe it's because many Christians are just not content and satisfied with God, with His Word, with preaching. They feel like there needs to be more than just living out your Christian life, learning God's Word, being equipped, and trying to serve God. You need some kind of movement. It's like, I need something to be connected to. I need something to identify myself with. It's like there's something missing inside the Christian. That they are not content with Christ and Him crucified. They're not content with hearing the Word of God preached. They're not. They want to hear God's Word preached, but they need it to be preached by some celebrity and some big movement. I don't know. There's something. I think it's a sign of something. I think the big movements, and you may disagree with this, I think the big movements are actually symptoms of a spiritual problem in the church. The movements explode because there's something not right in the churches. So the people in the church, they either need more, craving more, or just not content. Whatever the case may be, either it's something the churches are not doing, there's some kind of problem, and then everyone goes run off. In many cases, these big ministries kind of become, they may be connected to a church, but they almost serve as a parachurch ministry, and everybody goes running to them. There's got to be a reason we're drawn to that, but we are over and over and over and over and over again. So there is the young, restless, and reformed. There were articles and articles and articles and articles written about it. It was a big deal. People were studying the movement. People continue to study the movement. What happened? And then what happened to it? What happened? It went away relatively quick, and many of the people who are involved in that movement, many of them now, Joshua Harris was a part of that movement, at least in some ways. He was connected with some of the individuals. They interviewed Joshua Harris in that podcast episode. You can listen to it. And of course, now he doesn't even associate himself with Christianity. A lot of the people who are associated with that movement now are part of the movement of deconstruction, where they're deconstructing their faith and moving away from it. So there was a lot of destruction that came out of it. And why, and there's always a question. How come in so many of these movements, when the movement finally ends, there's always a trail of broken bodies? Why is that? Now, you could argue, I mean, there's a lot of trail of broken bodies in the wake of what happens with Mars Hill. I mean, you could go on and on. And what happens? What is it that brings people there? But here is my question, and this is the whole reason I'm doing this. And I know this may not be a very long episode, but I just want to get to the main question. All right, here's the main question. Here's the one question. At the beginning of in 2000, we were at basically the beginning of a new movement within the church. And there's been lots of movements that come and go, right? You can go back to, I can just go back from the 1980s, go through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and we've seen these movements. But here we are today, August the 7th, 2021. Where's the next big movement? Where is the movement? Is there even a current movement going on? I think the deconstructionism is the movement right now. And that's not a church movement. That's a movement away from the church. That's a movement in many cases away from Christianity. So where is that next big movement? And I don't really have an answer. And the more in the darkness, laying there in the darkness of my room, I started basically saying this to myself as I was laying there. If I can't identify the movements of the present, does that mean we've entered into a new phase of the church where there really isn't no new movement? There really isn't no new big thing. That we've reached a time where we're not new movements, new growth, but the movements have stopped. That we're in a period of declining. People are leaving. People are not attending. People are tuning out. So I guess I'll state the question this way. I'll state it. I guess maybe I'll try to do this in three parts. I don't have, again, no notes, no outline. I'm making this up as I go along. Because I think I'm going to do it this in three ways. So number one. Can you think of a really formidable movement in the church right now? A really big formidable movement. Now, there are lots of things happening in churches, no question, right? We can talk about the political hijacking of the church, but I mean, really, can you see like a clear movement? I think the churches are becoming more and more divided within, all kinds of churches are going in so many different directions right now. I don't know if there's a clear movement. So do you think that there is a clear movement right now in the church? And if you can, which one would you point to? Number two, can you predict what the next big movement will be? Like, do you see one that's currently forming? It's small right now, but you see, okay, that's going to be the next big thing, right? Do you see, or can you predict what the next, maybe it's not even forming yet, but can you look out and go, okay, that's where I think we're going. So can you name one now? Can you predict maybe what the next one will be? And then number three, is it possible that the church movement that we're seeing right now is actually a movement of no movement? That actually the church is reached a level of, and I'm not going to say this is it's going to sound bad, but we've reached kind of a stagnation. There's no new movement. Maybe there's no new celebrity. Maybe the celebrity thing's falling apart. Maybe all the church movements are falling apart. I know we're still going to have those conferences. Those are still going to happen. People are still going to pay money to go to, get in to see MacArthur for Shepherd's Conference, whatever. There's still going to be conferences, but I think they're not, they feel like that they're not relevant anymore. There was a time it was like, okay, here's they're doing the conference there. Let's blog about it. Let's live stream about it. Let's podcast about it. Let's keep up with everything going on at that conference, right? Who's speaking? Ooh, they did a Q&A. Ooh, what's happening there? And it's like, it was like a big deal. I think it's almost like, okay, a conference, yeah. And some people will blog about it. Yeah, some people will tweet about it. But I just feel like it's not near as relevant and as big a deal as it was. So can you name a movement now? Can you look into the future and go, that's where we're headed? That's going to be the next big movement. Or do you think that really the movement now is we are in a movement of no actual church movement? It's a time of declining. It's a time of losing relevance, losing celebrity, losing that. Now that may actually be a good thing spiritually. Is it possible that all of those, there's been just think about it. All the collapse of so many of the celebrities, so many of the big churches falling out. Hillsong is going through all of it's gone through. We can go on and on and on. Was it Sovereign Grace Ministries who went through, they went through all kinds of issues. Obviously the rise and fall of Mars Hill, it's not Saddleback, it's a Willow Creek. I think they went through all kinds of issues. I can go on and on and on and on and on. Have we reached a level where it's just like that the next big movement is going to be looked at now? The older generation may still be longing for that next big movement because they've kind of been raised on the next big movement, the next big conference, the next big, celebrity pastor. But I wonder if the younger generation kind of looks at all of that now and just kind of go, what? It just looks tacky, dumb, foolish, like a relic from the past. They were talking in that episode of Rise and Fall of Mars Hill when Mark Driscoll was I think he was in London, or he was somewhere in the UK. And he had just spoken, and the place was packed. They said it was sold out. I don't know if that means they paid for people to get in to see Mark Driscoll. I wouldn't be shocked if they did, because that's how it's just crazy. It was sold out. We sold out the arena so people could hear him preach. That's just so sacrilegious and ungodly. I don't understand how Christians buy into these things, but that's okay. So, but afterwards, he comes through the back door of the stage. It was almost like he's a rock star. We had to get him through the back, and he's going to get into the car. And there was some people out back who were, waiting for Mark Driscoll to get his autograph and take some pictures with him. Right. And so when they get in the car, and one of the guys who worked with Mark Driscoll, he looks at the situation, he's like, isn't that crazy? Those people are trying to get your autograph and photograph like you're some kind of rock star. And according to that person, now his account of the story is that, I think there was multiple people supposedly in the car, but he said Mark Driscoll looked at him and go, I'm kind of a big deal. And he wasn't joking that I'm a big deal. Well, that's that whole celebrity thing. And I think when you look at that, you're like, that's crazy. But I've seen it at these conferences where people literally wait to get the autograph of a MacArthur. What pastor? If someone came up to me to get an autograph, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? You want my autograph? No. Okay. It's not about me. It's about what I preach. It's what I teach. It's not about me. Now listen, I'm going to be very honest with you. Deep down, I want it to be about me. Deep down, I want people to come up and want my autograph. Now, I will say no because I think it's wrong, but I would want it, and I would walk away feeling great. It would build up my ego. It would be wrong. So I'm not acting like I'm more spiritual than anyone else, because I would love that. Yeah, which person wouldn't want to be recognized and people love you and praise you? I'm a sinner just like everyone else. So I'm not going to act like I'm more spiritual. I'm maybe even more unspiritual than the people who signed the autographs, because there's probably something in me that wouldn't even be able to handle it or control it. So I definitely understand the danger there, but I just think that maybe we've reached a tipping point where scandal, failure, implosions, and I think people have kind of grown tired maybe of the whole, and now we keep seeing articles about, celebrity pastors. It's a problem. And the next thing you know, a new one arises, but who's the new one? Think about it right now. R.C. Sproul's gone. Ravi Zacharias, he's gone, and got scandal in the wake of his passing. MacArthur is, I don't know, in his 80s now? Is he close to his 80s? So he's not really the new rock star. I mean, he's at the end. Who else do we have? Piper's not even that relevant. He's going to write a new book about the second coming, I think. But I mean, is he really that relevant anymore? Who's the new? I mean, there's a lot of celebrities, I guess, in the charismatic world, but they don't have a lot of. Do they have a lot of crossover appeal? Beth Moore is still big. Even Joyce Meyer's kind of lost her. Is she even that relevant anymore? But a lot of the people who are still kind of names, they're still older. Who's that next up and coming? Have we reached a point where that's just kind of done? I don't know where we're going. Look, I don't know of a movement right now, right? I don't really know. I could talk about the political hijacking of the church. I mean, the rise of the patriot churches, I don't think is a massive movement. That's relatively small. So, I mean, we do have, but that's not one movement. You could call it the rise of the progressive church, the quote unquote woke church, and you have the rise of the, politically right conservative church. So you have the political hijacking, which is a movement, but it's not one movement. It's split, it's divisive, and it's problematic. So that's not like a movement that's going to bring some people together, but I don't see that as one of these traditional movements. But that is an issue in the church. I don't call that a movement. I call that more of an issue. So could a charismatic church now, have another massive revival like, the Lakeland revival or Brownsville? Is that even really doable in 2021? I mean, is it even? I think that's a thing of the past. So I don't see a current movement. I don't know where the next movement would even come from. I think maybe are we on the edge of a new movement that's going to be a movement of Christianity separate from the local church? Are we going to see more and more professing Christians separating themselves from the local church? They don't want to attend church. They don't want nothing to do with it. So political, all of the issues that people are having with the church. And we're going to see, like, you're going to have the Christianity that's still connected to local church, and you're going to have a Christianity arising. I'm trying to give a visual illustration. I got two books here. Right. So on my right hand, I have a book. This is the Christianity still connected with the local church, right? Local church ministries, local church. And then you're going to have over here a rise of a Christianity. People are still passionate about God, passionate about his word, still love Christ, but they are just disconnected from the church. They in a sense deconstructed, not from Christianity, but from the church. Is that the kind of movement that we're seeing right now? Maybe, and then I think maybe the lack of actual movements, again, throughout my Christian life, it just always felt like, oh, that's going on, oh, that's going on, oh, that. And it's like there was always this to keep up with what was happening. And now it's just kind of like, what is happening? It's almost the absence of church movement and maybe the answer of the movement we're in. It's a period of stagnation. When I say stagnation of movement, stagnations of new celebrities emerging, stagnation of new big conferences that everyone has to run to and pay money to get into. It's a stagnation of that. That doesn't mean there's a stagnation of people growing in their faith, a stagnation of people spiritually, because I think in some cases those things were a fraudulent spirituality, a fraudulent. It was a lot of zeal, a lot of passion, and a lot of excitement. But it was a lot of passion, zeal, and excitement more because you were identified with a movement and you were identified with certain celebrities. I think we're in an interesting period right now, and I can't quite pinpoint what is going on. I've been talking about the political hijacking of the church forever. And I will continue to do that. But I think something is just not making sense to me right now, right? I think, and I keep asking, are we on the verge? All right, here we go. So someone just said something. Perhaps due to the 6 months or more of attending worship online has brought a movement of apathy. Now that's a good point. I'm glad Will just brought that up. The pandemic has obviously had a massive impact. All right. I see. I don't know if I have the article saved because I don't want to give the statistics and be 100% wrong here. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Let me see here. Okay, that's my study on that. Let me see if I can find it. See here. I save so many articles a day that I never get. I'm like, I'm going to save that article. We'll talk about that. Here we go. Here we go. More than 40%. Now, this is an article. More than 40% of black churchgoers want to keep hybrid church. So that's 40% of blacks who now don't want just church in person. They want a hybrid where, like, sometimes I'll go to church in person, but I also want to be able to just watch online. And there's other statistics about how many people are just not coming back. They're just like, I know that I'm going to just listen online. So that may be kind of I don't know if we call that a movement, but I think that's kind of a move away from a lot of those other things. In other words, the pandemic put a lot of those other things on hold. Some of those big conferences, some of those big things that put that on hold. So maybe all I am feeling and seeing is just the results of the pandemic. But if the Delta variant, Delta Plus variant, which is now present in San Francisco, if that begins, and nobody knows how bad the Delta Plus variant is going to be, nobody really knows. It's going to take some time to figure it out. But if this becomes another big thing and stops a lot of this again, then how does the church recover? So I guess we could phrase it this way. What is going to be the next movement of the post-pandemic church? Is this just a temporary pause? Just a temporary pause. And then once everything truly gets back to normal, we'll pick back up and move into a new movement. I'm just not so sure. I think I was getting ready to say, I feel that maybe, are we on that ledge? I think I may have said edge. Are we on that ledge of what I believe the Bible predicts as the ultimate apostatizing of the church? The church is just going to systematically fall apart doctrinally, theologically, morally, and it's just going to fall further and further apart. And if the church is going to get worse and worse and worse, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, is quote unquote the end times church really not going to be church the way we think of it? It's going to be individual Christians basically outside of the church. The church is going to become so apostate that Christians are not going to be inside a church. Is the end times church not going to be in a church? I did a whole podcast episode about that with some ladies who wrote, I played an interview with some ladies who wrote a book about that kind of thing. I don't agree with all of their theology, but they're kind of arguing that the end times church is going to really be underground. They're not going to be in a building because all of the mainstream churches are going to become apostate and corrupt. Now that gets into a lot of your view of eschatology, but my eschatology, I may not have everything figured out, and I'm always struggling with questions about eschatology, but I strongly believe things are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I think one of the major areas is going to be the church. So if we've reached the kind of the ledge, we've come right to the edge of that period of time. If we're really there, then I don't think there's going to be any more new movements. And if we have a new movement, it's going to be absolutely apostate. Now, you can look back, most of the church movements have had major issues. We can look at the emergent church movement, major issues. The church growth movement, major. Seeker-sensitive movement, major issues. We could go on and on and on. The missional church, I don't know, we could take some of that apart. And then within some of those movements, you had the ecumenical movement that was thrown in there. I mean, a lot of those were majorly problematic. I think you could look at many of the major church movements, and you always have to ask yourself, how doctrinally sound were they? I mean, from my perspective, the Young Restless Reformed Yeah, it was awesome, in my opinion, seeing a lot of discussion about Reformed theology and getting back to reading the Puritans and talking about, issues pertaining to soteriology. But I was always baffled and confused why that movement would also embrace many charismatics who, well, I completely reject charismatic theology. I don't care if you've got your soteriology right with the doctrine of election. Your charismatic theology, I can't tolerate or accept. So, but it was almost like, hey, it's all great. We got this one thing in common. Let's ignore everything else. We don't agree on baptism. We don't agree on church. We don't agree on how to do the Lord's Supper. We don't agree on the charismatic gifts. But hey, we believe in a couple of points about soteriology. So that was already, to me, very interesting watching that movement unfold. I just feel like there is no movement right now. Even I've been paying attention a lot lately, and the person listening, he may be able to say yes or no to this, but I've been watching a lot of just paying attention to sermons on sermon audio. And I'll look and I'll be like, okay, that sermon has how many downloads? What in the world? And it'll be like one of the ones where you pay to get featured, right? And I'll look at it and I'll be like, man, back in the day, a featured sermon would have 5,000 downloads. At least from my perspective, even like something like sermon audio that used to just be like this big thing, it doesn't even seem like it's that big a deal anymore. And sermon audio keeps offering, and I can't say what's going on with sermon audio, but I just see that they keep offering new broadcasters to be able to sign up for $1. And, used to it was like $150 sign up fee. I can't remember what it was. And they keep doing that. And you're like, what's going on there? Is that like sermon audio was a big deal at one point. And now like a featured sermon. In fact, let me just look. Maybe I'm wrong here. I'll check myself live on the air, but I know I've noticed it. And I'm like, wait, those numbers seem way, way smaller than it would be. Okay, so the featured sermon today is Scripture Commentary, Isaiah 53 from a church, and it's had 240 downloads. That's a featured sermon. 240. That's featured. My last message I did with the Bible study on Revelation chapter 3, the last Bible study exercise I did, it's got well more than 240. I don't even know. And now, of course, that's because my stuff is not just my stuff is all over the place. But that's featured. I mean, that's a sermon site where it's featured and it's only 240. That to me seems like that's not going in the right direction. And Will, I don't know if you remember, and I'll ask him, do you remember like how many a featured sermon used to get? Or am I just like, my memory, I have a false memory. I just remember that featured sermons on sermon audio used to be like, what in the world? How did they get that many? I used to look at it going, wow. And now 240, what is 240? 240 is nothing. I mean, that's on a sermon site. I'm getting more than 240 off Pandora. Okay. And that's not because I'm a better preacher than that by any means. So, maybe that's a sign that things are not, in other words, now it's not, if you're going to be heard, it's not on a sermon site, it's on Pandora. Maybe that's a change. In other words, things are not connected to a Christian site now. Things are connected to Apple Podcast or Pandora. I mean, Pandora we're getting so many listens from Pandora right now that I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with Pandora. But it just seems like something is happening, and it's not the same kind of. And I've talked about this before, where I kept saying, and Will's probably heard those episodes where I was like, I just feel that there's an apathy. There's a deadness within Christianity. And I'm not saying that this is that exact same feeling. I'm just looking, going, where's the next big thing? I used to remember walking into a Christian bookstore going, oh man, that's a big thing. Oh, remember Rod Bell? Was it Rod Bell? All of his DVDs? Man, that was a huge deal. I mean, Rod Bell was everywhere. Was it Rod Bell? Rob Bell? Rod Bell? I can't remember his name. His DVD series, every church was using it. Every church had people watching those DVDs. That was almost like a movement within the church. Obviously, we had the Prayer Jabez phase. Obviously, we had Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, Purpose-Driven Church. Joel Osteen was a huge deal at one point. It's like there was always this like next big, that's the big book. That's the Harbinger. Remember that there was all of these things. Okay. So Will is saying that when it comes to sermon audio, he doesn't remember, but it was much more than that. Okay. So I'm not crazy. Something, it just, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'll just throw it back out there. 3 things I just want you to think about today, and you try to process them. And again, maybe you have a better insight than I have here. But is there a movement right now that I'm just missing? Like this big movement? Oh, yeah. I definitely got, back in 2011, I got far more than that not being featured. Yeah. Oh, I think everyone, even people who are not featured, got more than 240. 240 would be for like, I think you could be a brand new broadcaster on sermon audio in 2011, brand new, and put your first sermon up, and you were going to get more than 240. You're going to get more than 240 in a couple of hours. Something has changed there. So here's the 3 things. Number 1, do you think there's a movement right now? And if you is, what would you point to? What would you point to? Do you think a new movement is building? Do you think there's a new movement? Or if you can't find the one that's building, what's your prediction of where the next new movement's going to be? And number 3, do you believe that, or do you think that the reality of not really having a movement right now is really a movement in itself, and it's moving us to something? Now, we definitely have the deconstructionism going on right now. I mean, TikTok is filled with former pastors posting their deconstruction videos. And thanks to a listener who alerted to me to that trend, now there's been article after article after article talking about that trend. But that's again, deconstructing either from Christianity completely or deconstructing from the church. That's not a church movement unless you're going to say the new movement in the church is a movement away from the church. There's something, I just can't put my finger on it, but I wanted at least to turn on the microphone today and at least share some of these thoughts, because at 12:30 in the morning listening to that, I was like, whoa, I remember that movement. Man, young, restless, and reformed. Wow, that was everywhere. Don't waste your life by Piper. And then at that same time, you had the explosion of Christian hip hop and Christian rap with Lecrae, all the different people, Reach Records. I mean, that was like, it was everywhere. That was exploding. And many of those Christian rappers were very reformed in their theology. It was like a major movement going on there at that time as well. And that came and went. And it's just like, where, and I watched all of those things come and go. And now it's just kind of like, yeah. I mean, Christian bookstores are almost a thing of the past. I mean, we still have at least one big one here in Abilene, Texas. I haven't been into it in 10 years. But I mean, even that's kind of gone. So like, what are the big books in Christianity right now? Okay, let's just do it. Let's look really quick. Let's just look. All right, since we're taking down this path. Okay. See, books on the Christian best-selling list. Oh, there it is. Bestseller. See, what do we have here? The ones that show up here are Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Okay. All right. You talk about nothing new going on. The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. Why is that even there? The 5 love languages. Well, what? Okay, those are old. Okay, let's see if we have something here. Let's look here. Is that just best-selling of all time? Okay, here we go. Okay, here, best-selling Christian books based on the top 50 Christian bestseller list from July 2021. Okay, I think that other list was like best of all time or something. I'm like, what in the world? Okay, here's what we have. No, 5 Love Languages is actually on the top 50 now. That's from Gary Chapman. That was like a big deal in the 90s. Right? So we have Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen. We have Fault Lines by Vadi Bakum. Okay, that's the whole, critical race theory, okay, which I think is nothing but a distraction. I guess you could say that's a movement within Christianity right now. Jesus Calling by Sarah Young. Gentle and Lowly by Dane, how do you say his name? Ortlund, I guess. Then you have Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table by Louis Giglio, I guess is how you say his last name. You know I'm not familiar with any of these people. Best Seat in the House by Jaeger Nicholas. Dave Ramsey. Total Money Makeover. Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. Oh boy, that's a flashback. Then we have Joel Osteen, Peaceful on Purpose. I mean, none of these books, I don't even know these books. We have Erwin Lutzer. See some of these names, if you have Gary Chapman. Oh, Rick Warren is actually on the list. Purpose-Driven Life is actually on the current list. You talk about how just outdated this is and irrelevant. I mean, 5 Love Languages is ancient. Purpose-Driven Life is ancient. Dr. Henry Cloud, I don't know when Boundaries was written, but Dr. Henry Cloud is older. What is this? What in the world? There's nothing here. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I guess the current books, there's a coloring book that's on the top list. Okay. It's actually a coloring book. I'm not joking. No, we got the 5 languages of the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. We have Joyce Meyer, who shows up again. What else do we have here? We have Jesus Calling, Sarah Young, and then we have Empty Out the Negative by Joel Osteen. I mean, none of that is a movement. Those are many of those are older, outdated books by older writers, meaning they're just repackaging older stuff because there's nothing new, there's nothing trendy, there's nothing there. Maybe some of these books here are more trendy than I'm aware of, but that is literally from the best-selling Christian books list as of July 2021. That just shows you there's nothing going on there. There's nothing going on. Other than the fault lines thing, which is, obviously taking advantage of the CRT paranoia, fear, craziness, panic, insanity. All right. Yeah, that is just bizarre. That is really, I'm just kind of surprised by this. Oh, we got a book called Girls Wash Your Face. Okay. I don't know what that's about. Okay. Yeah, there is nothing here that goes, oh, okay, yeah, that's everywhere. There used to be a time, and we'll maybe able to verify this. There used to be a time that you could look at many of the books on the Christian best-selling list and be like, oh boy, remember with The Shack? There were just these books that would come out The Harbinger, these books, everyone was talking. You knew everyone was like, okay, yep, everybody's reading that. Yep, everybody's talking about that. There's been 50 podcasts on that book. Yep, that book. Even Your Best Life Now by Joel Osteen, everybody was talking about that. You knew about it. You kind of knew. That didn't mean you knew all of the books. That just means there was always some that you knew that were new, and you knew that everyone in your church was talking about it. Maybe your church was even doing a study on it, or you had friends who were talking about it. I look at that list. I have not heard. The books I have heard are old. So where's the new thing? So what is the current movement? Where do you think the next movement is? And do you think that the fact that there really isn't appear to be a movement is a movement? Just again, no notes, and I've gone 54 minutes. I apologize. But Yeah, that's what I was thinking about at about 1 a.m. this morning. I know you were probably deep in thought at 1 a.m. as well, but I was thinking that, and I was thinking, what in the world is Vince McMahon doing? Because they just released a bunch. Okay, I know you don't care about wrestling news, but they just got rid of a bunch of wrestlers in NXT, and I don't know what in the world. I think Vince McMahon thinks everything's getting ready to be locked back down, and they're making budget cuts to ensure that they can survive financially and making sure their stock holders are careful. So I was thinking about that because I just got a notification about that. So that's what I was doing. I was thinking about where's the church going and what in the world is happening in the world of wrestling. That was what I was doing at 1 a.m. So, but obviously I wanted to talk about the church thing because that's far more important than what's going on in wrestling. All right. You can let me know your thoughts. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. I'm sorry if this really wasn't that. If you didn't think this was that great, but it's just, I think it's something we have to consider, or at least for me, I think we have to pay attention to where the church could be going. And right now, I don't see a direction. I don't know. I just feel like we're right there at that tipping point, and it's getting ready to be. The church is getting ready to go through a really, 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 really bad time, and I think it's gonna see more and more churches fall apart and become more apostate. And it's just, and I think Christians are just going to, in a sense, be driven out of the church. Not by force, but just be driven out because there's no way that they can be a part of it anymore. I think that's going to be the new movement, is the movement of Christians out of the church. So I don't know. It's something to think about. All right. Email me your thoughts, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I'm going to check something. Because after so many comments on the chat thing, then they stopped showing up on the computer. So let me open up my iPad really quick just to make sure I didn't miss any comments. Because sometimes once I end, I'll realize, oh, there was more comments that I saw. So give me 1 second. I'll open this. All right, here we go. Open up the chat. Okay, all right, yeah, no more comments. I just wanted to make sure there were no more. All right. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Will, as always, for participating. You always he definitely helped add the pandemic part to the whole equation, which I was overlooking, and I'm glad he brought it up because that would have been a serious oversight because that has had a profound impact on a lot, and I think it's going to really impact where we're going. All right, I'll probably be back on the air here shortly. I got a couple of things I want to get done this afternoon, so I'll try to do that quickly. All right, thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.